Watch a movie, get inspired, give back, help a charity. It's time for a Movikarma watch party. Hey everybody, welcome to another Movikarma watch party. My name is Jared Milrad. I'm the founder of Movikarma and a show for a change. Our mission at a show for change in Movikarma is pretty simple. It's to get people engaged in inspiring stories, socially conscious stories and films from all around the world. And today we're really excited to have a couple special guests who we just recognized through our monthly A Show for a Change film festival. They're the team behind a film called Precursor. We're going to go ahead and watch the film in a moment for those of you who are joining via video, and then we're going to ask some questions and do some Q&A with these guys. So they are director Manolo Campos and writers, producers, actors, Cory McCants and Trinca. So just want to welcome you guys and thanks so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you so much for having us, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to do the screening first, and then we'll do Q&A in the back. You touched on something. I've spent a lot of my life in politics. I actually just yesterday had a conversation with a friend who he pointed something out that I shared on social media, a political issue, and I changed my mind after listening to him, right? But I feel like this almost never happens. It's something I'm constantly working on. Can you just talk about, was that an intentional part of this to sort of show what's possible through dialogue and maybe reframe how we talk to each other? Cory, do you want to comment on that first?
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think that's kind of exactly it, what you just said, because similar to what Manolo said, like Alan and I have these kind of conversations all the time, especially when he was still in New York and I was in Buffalo. Like he would call me or I would call him, and we would just have these kind of conversations. And the one difference is because we're such good friends, there doesn't need to be the caution of I'm not trying to be offensive, but right, we just talk. And the more you can talk, the more you can understand where someone's coming from, and your ideas can like meet, hash out, and then you can reassess what you really feel. And there's been conversations where he said something to me and been like, I don't know if I really fully think this. Like I'm saying it right now, but as we talk, I kind of feel differently, and vice versa. Like there's been times where I've changed what I thought based on having these conversations, and I think it's a really big thing that we know how the left feels, and we know how the right feels, right? Like you see that on social media all the time. But what's not being talked about is that middle ground of like what's good from here and what's good from here, because one side can't be completely wrong and one side can't be completely right. And if you think that, that might be part of the issue right there. So when we just when they approached me about it and we started writing it, I think the very first thing was we got to do this right then. Like if we're gonna do it, we got to do it right. And although we have very similar views, it couldn't be a piece that someone that disagreed thought, okay, these are just guys that feel this and they just wanted to bash us. It couldn't go that way. So we needed to really think about how both sides of the coin feels and have both sides feel justified. So that's probably one of the more difficult parts, but that was like exactly what we needed, to have both sides feel like someone was speaking up for us,
Right. Yeah. So that both sides had some kind of wisdom, that there was some truth from where they were coming from. Alan, what was that like for you? Because it felt like, or did you feel like you were playing a character, or were there elements of what you were saying that were true to how some of the issues, the way you felt?
Well, so what's really interesting about that is when we wrote it, there was definitely a little concern on my part, like just a sprinkle of concern of like, well, if people watch this and they're like, oh, they wrote it and they're acting in it, so maybe they're portraying people who think the way that they think, right? But then you just got to throw that out. We're writing a script, we're making a short. But I will say for the most part, what we tried to do was grab some of the better arguments, right? Or some of the ideas that maybe are misrepresented by one side, and just sort of highlight some of those things and do it a little bit of justice. Like, listen, these people aren't all crazy. And guess what? They're also not all racist, right? It's like, but you have to be able to bridge that gap. You have to be able to have that conversation and break that wall down. Otherwise, you're just going to build them taller and thicker.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So trying to just sort of cut right through the BS, or cut right through the barrier right away. Because I felt like you guys went into it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I will also say that I think that we, like, to your point earlier, I think that we're all in a position where we all think that we know best, right? We all think we know best, and we hold other people to the same standard, but that's not real. It's not really fair to do. And in a society with so many people and so many complexities, you have to sit down and be willing to have real conversations and put your own biases aside to hear what somebody else has to say, which really is the main message of the piece is can we put some of this stuff aside and give the other person a piece of the benefit of the doubt so that we can maybe find some common ground. And look, does my character and his character walk away being best friends? Probably not. Probably not. But we don't walk away hating each other or thinking that the other is the enemy.
Yeah, simple and yet powerful. I have a lot of questions about the moment we're in, and and how maybe social media has impacted some of that. So hold that thought. Manolo, I wanted to talk to you about the visual approach that you took here, because I thought it was really fascinating with both the use of sound, where at times we couldn't hear, we heard bits and pieces of the argument, which I thought spoke to basically media and how it usually sounds when you watch cable news. Could you talk a little about the visual and the
definitely
audio? Yeah.
So I think that in 2020, 21st century, we're living in a very completely social, let's go social media. It's not even social, relationships. It's social media relationships, where even doesn't matter where you're from. All countries, TV shows are 90% equal, like the same. Like you see debates on TV, you see like the Big Brothers shows, the Jersey Shore shows, like all the shows are almost the same everywhere. For some reason, like the whole platforms are copying each other in every country, and you never see people talking. You hear people screaming, like in most of the show where there is some difference, conflicts, any like discuss, they scream. You can't even hear what they're saying. And that was the first thing I thought. It's like, this is something that most of the time when you hear a conversation, in most of the time, you hear a conversation, people start to lap each other on talk, and at the end, you're just throwing thoughts, but you're not having the time. You're not taking the time to hear, think about it, and then answer. And maybe you don't even answer because at that point you might even agree with the other side. You just like maybe try to understand the other side. That was the main point for that talking words, because every time I see people on TV or in any shows talking, they're screaming at each other, and I think from my perspective, I think it's something they do so the audience don't really understand what's going on.
Right.
Like at the end, everybody gets their conclusion. Nobody understands any of the other side. So it's so difficult for anybody to get educated through that. So education is a point where I go. Nobody's educating anybody online. Just what we are absorbing is that, like, bah, 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 bah. But you don't learn anything from that.
Yeah. There's no growth at all that comes out of it. And it seems like there was an arc that you took with the characters to go towards that growth and education later on. Alan and Cory, wanted to ask you too about kind of the moment that we're in, especially over the past, I feel like several years with the rise of social media, especially during the pandemic, where we're more isolated than ever in a lot of ways. Did you feel like these characters and the way you wrote the script, was it in part a response to that, that they were sort of in the almost isolated echo chambers, it feels like at times?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. Basically, after the George Floyd murder, I called Cory pretty much that day, and I was like, man, like I can feel the energy of the country right now, and it is in such a low, dark place. And in a weird way, at the beginning, there was like this coming together. Like everybody who watched that video was like, "That's wrong." Like I didn't meet one person who watched that video and was like, "Oh, like, you know, he deserved it for this and that." At least not in the beginning, but like, and there was something that was kind of nice about that, almost like that, post 9/11, like we love America coming togetherness. But it was really interesting because right after that, really almost instantaneously, it was split, and all of a sudden now there's two sides of an issue, and I didn't even understand how we got there, and I don't think a lot of people did either, right? And so what ended up happening was this sort of like, you're either with us or you're against us, and it was like, well, hold up, well, can we talk a little more specifically about what it is that I would be for or against, right? And it wasn't happening. The conversation wasn't happening. It just seemed like a lot of yelling and then a lot of counter yelling. And then we came to this place where it's like, well, we're never going to get anywhere. And I really believe that when dialogue dies, we all die. And that is going to happen if we don't learn to put ourselves aside and listen. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. I do agree with just about everything Alan said. And I think that we even though we have so many similarities, there are very big differences between us, and that we use that in our advantage most times, I think. And with writing this, I think we got into like the heart of it right after like the, riots started happening and stuff like that. And that was some of the conversation we talked about. And like a lot of things that were happening, we were like, well, what do we add from what's happening now? What do we leave out? Like that was all part of the like puzzle piece of putting together like how to make this, not a 20-minute documentary, how to keep it, what we intended it to be. And I think that you can't ignore what is happening and like what birthed this, you know what I'm saying? This came from what we are in right now. And I think a lot of what happened is due to people being stuck inside and you know what I'm saying? Like there's all these things culminating into one big explosion of something happening. But I do think that we took the advantage of having our perspectives. And one thing that I don't always see people talk, and I see it more now, but I don't always see people talk about it. Like I am a Black man in this country dealing with things that Black men or Black people or people of color deal with that others don't. And so to ignore that, to try and say, no, like we're exactly the same, is like, it's ignorant to a point. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like that would do no one any justice. And so that was a very important part as well. And one line that I needed in there, and it was probably one of the most me things from this character, was saying that I don't speak for all Black people, because it's something that having a lot of friends who are not, who are not people of color, I need to tell them when we have these conversations, like, look, just because I'm saying it does not mean it's Bible, it does not mean this is law of Black people, like this is one person's thoughts. And we needed it in there because there will be people from any side, from different races, who will say, like, that doesn't speak for me though. And it's like, we're not saying it does. This is a conversation. And it feels like we forget what a conversation is like. So this is a conversation between two people who think these ways, and this is what happened. You can see what happens when you have your conversation. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true, right? And I think that sometimes people want this decree to come down from on high, where it's like you've decided how we should feel. I was gonna follow up on that in a few different ways. One is I feel like you guys have this great chemistry and this sort of great trust between you two. Do you feel like this particular conversation, is it possible to have between people who maybe don't have that foundation of trust and connection and friendship, or should we be pushing ourselves more as a society to those more uncomfortable places where even strangers perhaps could have some of these dialogues?
So I think to Manolo's point actually about social media and what that sort of harvested, we just sort of were like in an echo chamber most of the time, right? We unfriend and block people we don't agree with. And so, you know, we post a brave status, but it's not that brave because only people who agree with you are going to see it, to like it and comment on it. And so when we do that, we end up, I mean, that's the wall. I mean, it's really interesting because we don't even realize it, but we are building walls between us and the people we think are in the wrong or we don't agree with. And I think we have to point that out first before we can move on to, okay, you have to see the bubble you're living in first. And once you see it, then you can see the barriers, right? You can see where the bubble ends and the rest of the world begins. And once you see that, then you can sort of be a little, it's all about awareness. I think you have to like be aware, zoom out, minimize your ego. And these are things that are sort of, and then, and that's a big then I do believe that conversations between people who don't agree are going to be more possible. But it's like, I mean, those are big asks, but I think that I have hope that we can get there. And that's why we make this stuff.
Right. I totally agree with that. I do feel like these are conversations that should be had amongst friends, because if there's one thing you realize, it's that, and it might just be human nature, but most of us have this like lack of empathy when we really need it. And it's hard to really understand these situations if you're not in them. So most people who are fighting on the side of social justice either feel like they've been wrong or have someone they care about be wrong. And if it hasn't happened to you, then you almost don't believe it. Or you're like, but is it really like that? Like, you're skeptical of what people say if it hasn't happened to you.
Yeah.
So it is important that if you are friends with someone who shares different experiences, that you have these conversations so you can like enlighten each other, right? Not just one side to the other, but you can enlighten each other. And I think it's interesting. I saw a video after this was written and everything where something very similar to this happened. And I don't want to like misquote or like, you know, say wrong what happened, but it was pretty much a Black Lives Matter group who went to protest at a Trump rally. And what ended up happening through like, you know, at first it was a lot of animosity. What ended up happening was the speaker, the guy running the Trump rally, was like, we're going to give them 10 minutes to talk. They want to talk. They say that's all they want. We'll give them 10 minutes to talk up on stage. We'll give them our platform and we'll see what happens. And the guy running the Black Lives Matter protest, he spoke. A lot of what he was saying, some people were booing, then some people were cheering. But at the end of it, a lot of those people afterwards were asking for pictures and were like having dialogue. Like it was this. It was like, this is life. They were really doing it. And I was just like, this is like art imitates life. Like this is crazy, because that was really it happening. And I'm like, so it is possible for even strangers to have this if you just give that 10 minutes. If for 10 minutes you can see, or not even, if for 10 seconds you can see, I don't hate you and I'm not mad at you, I just want to talk. And then you let the defense down, which is what happened in the film. Like they try and talk and there's this big argument and they stop. And they try and talk again and really talk. And then all this stuff unfolds. Yeah. So I do think it's possible. I think it's needed with friends, but I do think it's possible with strangers as well.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared Milrad, the founder of Movikarma. Thanks so much for stopping by our page. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this channel with your friends and family so we can continue to transform entertainment into action.